Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. When was the last time you rode public transportation in Hampton Roads? Was it light rail, a bus, a ferry? Hampton Roads Transit provides over 14 million trips a year on public transportation, and now they are looking to up their game and provide better, faster, and more convenient services for your commuter needs, especially if you or someone you know rides the bus. It's been more than 20 years since bus service has been updated. Up next on Another View, we talk about HRT, buses, and how you can help move regional transportation in Hampton Roads to the next level. Stay tuned. Another View is next.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective. This is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. A couple of community events going on before we get started with our conversation today about transportation. Congressman Bobby Scott is coming to Smithfield. So all of you in Smithfield and Isle of Wight, he's doing a town hall this coming Monday, March the 18th at 6 p.m. at Smithfield High School. That's on Turner Drive in Smithfield. Come on out and find out. He wants to talk to you about his work as chairman of the Committee on Education and Labor, as well as other issues pending Congress. So I know that should be a great town hall. It is Monday, March the 18th at 6, Smithfield High School, Smithfield, Virginia. If you have any questions, you can call 757-380-1000. And then next Thursday, March the 21st, the Darden College of Education and Professional Studies Department of Teaching and Learning, in partnership with Literacy Research and Development Center, will host Dr. Bettina Love. She's an associate professor of educational theory and practice at the University of Georgia. Now, she's doing a public lecture entitled "We Want to Do More Than Survive: Abolitionist Teaching." That's at 6:30 p.m. in the Multipurpose Auditorium, room 1106 in the Education Building at Old Dominion University. The lecture is free. It's open to the public. Dr. Love is an award-winning author and one of the field's most esteemed educational researchers in the area of hip-hop education, and her research focuses on ways in which urban youth negotiate hip-hop music and culture to form social, cultural, and political identities to create new and sustaining ways of thinking about urban education and intersectional social justice. So it sounds like a really interesting lecture. It's free. It's open to everyone. You can go to odu.edu if you'd like to find out more information about that. Just keeping you informed about some things happening in the Hampton Roads area. So even if you've never ridden a Hampton Roads Transit bus, chances are you know someone who does. Bus service in our region connects workers to jobs, customers to businesses, students to education and workforce training opportunities, and the list goes on. The last time HRT updated bus service in our region was about 20 years ago. A lot has changed in terms of public transportation, including the introduction of Lyft and Uber, new technologies, and new places to go. So HRT needs your help as they modernize services. And here to tell us about the Transformational Transit Project study is the Chief of Staff for HRT, Dr. Brian Smith. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me. And the Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, Mayor John Rowe, who is also a commissioner with the Transportation District Commission of Hampton Roads and regional co-chair to the Transformational Transit Project study. Whew. Hi.
Mouthful. Hi, Barbara. How are you?
So good to have you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And Joe Dillard, who is the liaison with Hampton Roads Transit for Government Affairs. Hi, Joe. How you doing?
Hey, Barbara. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. And CEO William Harrell, unfortunately, had a family emergency. He was unable to join us today, but we are wishing him and his family well. So why now? Why all of a sudden, and Brian, I'll start with you, are we talking about making changes, particularly to bus service, but to transportation, regional transportation in Hampton Roads?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question, and that really gets to the heart, I think, of this project. And I'll mention, too, we have a website if folks want to visit there to learn more. It's transformtransit.com. But what we've seen, I think, in the last few years especially, is just so much transformation that's happening and I would say in the marketplace across the board, including in transportation. And then, as you mentioned, with new technologies that are coming online, we just think it's time to take a fresh look and I think maybe at the heart of the project is, saying what should our future look like? What do we want to, have in our future especially in terms of improving the bus system? We see this as really a pivotal time. There's so much change that's going on, and we just want to ask that fundamental question: where should we track in the future?
And Mary Rowe, you're not just depending on the brains around the room to come up with this transformation. You guys really are trying to engage the community.
We are, very much so. In fact, we've undertaken a survey. We've asked people to respond and tell us what they would like to see as the vision. And what we want to do is build the vision and then figure out how to fund it.
So build a vision first and then figure out how to fund it.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about building the vision, I have to tell you, Joe, I was surprised that we're still talking about buses, because it would seem to me as we talk about the future of transportation, it might be more light rail, or it might be, I don't know, some kind of high-speed trains or something that would be going on. Why buses?
Because buses right now at Hampton Roads are the backbone, not just Hampton Roads, in our sector right now today, buses are the backbone of public transportation. I think one of the reasons or one of the concerns in our region is our mayor beside us, and I'm not saying this because he's here, he kind of started a partnership with the mayor in Norfolk where they had the 10 cities. Mm-hmm. So we have a problem where it comes to regionalism and us working as a region. And I think your listeners should know that right now, the way our bus system is set up is based on each city gets what they pay for as an a la carte service. So we don't have a true regional network. So when we can fix the regional bus system, which we supposedly, quote unquote, provide, I think that'll give us better opportunities when it comes to extending the light rail and things of that magnitude. So I think we need to go ahead and fix our backbone first, what we rely on, and it will give us better opportunities to branch out to those futuristic transit options.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about transportation, public transportation in Hampton Roads. Do you take public transportation? What's your experience, and what would you like to see in terms of the future of public transportation? Give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Brian, when we look at the system as it is today, in each city, because you service the peninsula as well as the south side.
Yes, indeed.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct on that? Okay. And each city gets to decide how the buses are running and so forth. So if I live in Norfolk, say, for example, and I work in Virginia Beach, and maybe Virginia Beach's buses stop sooner than Norfolk buses. So there's a possibility I could get stuck. Is that?
That's absolutely true. In fact, we hear those kinds of stories from the community. I'm thinking now of some of the research that's happened at the Transportation Planning Organization that shows that most of us, even though, of course, we live in wherever we might live, whatever particular city, we tend to do life across the region, and that includes where we work. So that most people who are commuting every day actually work in a different city than where they live. Mm-hmm. And so, we kind of, I think it's true that whether it's for work or, where we go to church or other community events, there's so many things to enjoy across Hampton Roads, and we tend to do that as a region. But then when we look at, as was mentioned, some of the funding model and the structure for how services are planned, that ends up being done by locality, locality based, and so we hear these stories quite frequently. Folks find a job opportunity in one city, and if it wasn't for the challenges of transportation, they would look forward to taking that. But it really does create some frustration, I would say, for our customers.
And everybody rides public transportation, do they not?
Not everybody.
Okay.
And that's the problem. We want to make public transportation the alternative of choice. And the vast majority of our ridership are transit-dependent people who have no other form of transportation. Mm-hmm. And in effect, as Brian and Joe are talking about, we have 6 individual transit systems that kind of operate under a false regional umbrella. Each jurisdiction decides how much transit they're going to have, and there's truly no regional service that's funded on a regional basis.
So part of that funding is going to have to be also figuring out a different model, perhaps?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So, Joe, the attitude that usually poor minority people are the only ones riding the bus, is that true?
That is not true. Majority of our bus riders right now, we did the origin and destination study, are going from work to home, home to work, over 80%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but poor minorities is the perception of what the bus looks like. But any given moment, Barbara, during peak hours. So if we go out now, it's not considered a peak hour. It's going to like maybe an empty bus, a lot of poor minorities. But during peak times, where we've been on services with a lot of our elected officials, it's a melting pot and it's a diverse group. So it's really not just poor minorities per se. They're dependent riders on the bus. Just because you're a dependent rider doesn't mean that you're poor, nor does it mean that you're a minority. So we hopefully with this study, and I know Brian's going to talk about the survey, some of the results that they're going to see, and as we move forward, we're going to try to knock down some of those myths that seem to be lingering in the region.
But our region, though, is so car dependent. As opposed to where I'm from Baltimore, riding the bus was a given. I mean, public transportation was a given. New York, Chicago, things of that nature. How do we change the mindsets of people, Brian, that public transportation is a better option?
Yeah, I think, it really will hinge in some respect upon providing a better service. If the service is reliable, if it's accessible, if it's convenient, then that's probably going to, be the ingredients for success in terms of attracting more ridership. And maybe somebody would, if they know that they can depend upon public transportation, then they'd be willing to take that step. But with some of the challenges we've seen, I think the reliability of the service and the efficiency of the service, as we've talked already, the goal is really to develop a better regional system, better connections, better service. And if we can reach for that and get some consensus in the community around where does the region want to go in terms of designing that kind of a system, that's it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing perhaps in attracting that ridership, but that's part of it.
Mayor Rowe?
Brian mentioned the word efficiency, and that's kind of an itchy word. When you look at our cost per hour, we're 20% less than our peers.
Okay.
And that's pretty
peers
efficient.
Meaning like in Richmond or different areas? Okay.
Jacksonville.
Raleigh.
Different sides of right.
Yes.
Okay.
Comparable transit systems. So we're very cost effective. We can, with any measurement, how many brake shoes can you do an hour? Hands down, we're below the average. What hamstrings us is our funding mechanism. And if we could design a transit system that ignores jurisdictional boundaries, we have early data that says we can be 26% more structurally efficient.
If we can do that, make it
Correct.
regional as opposed to specific cities. So there's a lot of talk about rebuilding, or not talk, it's actually going to happen, building another crossing at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. We look at different ways that seem to be saying, hey, let's provide even more ways for cars to go. How, again, do we combat that to get folks out of their cars and into public transportation, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and certainly we've seen in recent years, and it's very exciting to see some of the progress that the region is making, particularly on some of these major road projects. So we think of Interstate 64 on the peninsula, for example, the widening there. I think it's been very beneficial. And other projects we're seeing come online. I think part of it is going to be thinking about public transportation as an integrated part of the future and building that perhaps more into the planning process. So what we see in some other areas, for example, perhaps on a major interstate improvement, There could be some lane miles there that are dedicated for public transportation, or perhaps give some kind of priority movement to public transportation. And there's another example where if we provide these opportunities, that might be real attractive for folks who, I would definitely
I could either sit in the traffic jam or I could get on the bus and go.
So some of that forethought, I think, in building that into the planning efforts would go a long way.
Mayor Rowe?
There are 6 cities that make up the HRT footprint, and that is Portsmouth. I'll start with my hometown, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and Hampton and Newport News. And those 6 cities, when you look at the square miles, and this is back of the envelope figuring on my part, it's about 610 square miles. I mean, that's a big,
that's a big area.
Yeah. And our service area is probably 200 square miles.
Wow.
And so the question before us is, what do we do? Do we try to match our system to get the biggest coverage that we can get? Do we design our system around frequency so that if you miss the bus, you don't have to wait another hour? The next bus comes at 15 minutes. Do we try to match up supply where people live with demand where they want to go? So those are the types of scenarios that we're thinking about. Which one works best?
Got you.
I would add something comes to mind too. I think sometimes I think that we tend to have these conversations around kind of cars versus public transportation, or like it's an either or, rather than an and both, or an all of the above solutions to transportation. So in the case of public transportation, our buses, of course, they ride on the same roadways as everyone else. So we make very important investments in roadways. One of the ways that we can maximize on those investments is if we can move more people on a smaller footprint up and down those roadways. That's essentially what public transportation can do. That is a way to maximize our investments in roads. So, that I think is an example of it's an all of the above kind of thinking that maybe sometimes in the past perhaps we've thought more of one mode versus another. But as we ask, what do we want our future to look like? And, we can only build so many roads at the end of the day. Thinking about transit's role is
Are you going to get
important.
into the Jetson transport in the air at some point?
At some point, right? I've heard that's in the future, but...
Oh, gosh. So there's a question on Facebook that says, is there any chance that HRT will eventually have vans or minibuses that provide more direct services door to store, if you will?
Yes, indeed. Great question. In fact, as the scenarios that Mayor Rowe was just mentioning, as we're looking at different options for what the future can look like, one of them, several of those examples, what we're looking at would be referred to as flexible zones, if you will, where in certain areas where maybe it doesn't make sense to run a 40-foot bus, along certain roadways, we could have services in these zones that would provide an experience much like today with Uber or Lyft, and from the convenience of your phone, you can request a ride, you could plan your trip, pay for your trip, all from the convenience of a mobile device or some other way. And I think to do what this person, the listener, is asking about, provide more of a direct, customized experience, and that maybe that will bring that person to connect with a better core regional system. So these are definitely kind of examples of what we're looking at in the future. We're seeing this become more and more common across the country with these zones, if you will, for on-demand service. So we definitely want to explore that as well here in Hampton Roads.
Our phone lines are lit up, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Janice joins us from Newport News. Hi, Janice. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. I'd like to ask the people on the panel, earlier they discussed public input and the survey that's part of public input. That survey online ended on February the 28th. I would like to know, as a citizen of Newport News, which puts about $7.1 million into the public transportation system, where is more public input going to be allowed by citizens who are not necessarily bus riders?
Okay, Janice, thanks for your call. We can hear your phone or your radio in the background. So if you can turn it down, that would be great. But where else can she go, Brian?
Yes, thank you for that question. And this is definitely a conversation for the region, for communities across the region. So it is very important to get public input, as the mayor mentioned. And we do have the survey that did close out in the first part of this month. So we'll look forward to sharing results later this month. Mm-hmm. As we move into the month of May, we're focusing on a series of public meetings. So we're kind of looking forward to having several public meetings in each city. We'll
one in each city.
Two in each city at this phase. Okay. To continue to get input into the plan. Also, I'd mention for those who can access online the website transformtransit.com, please leave us comments online. You can email. If I could provide the email address is connect@transformtransit.com. So email us at connect@transformtransit.com. You can receive project updates that way, and that's where also we'll be sharing the locations, the dates, the times for those public meetings. As we move into the summer and continue based on all of the input from the community and begin to refine what we think the future could look like based on that input, we'll also be coming out later in the year with more opportunities for public input through public meetings and so forth.
Okay.
Can I piggyback on what Brian's saying?
Absolutely.
And just a greater level, the transparency in that public outreach. You can also contact us, like Janice, if she believes her civic league or her organization is somebody that we want to touch through that email, and we'll make sure we set it up where we're touching every organization that wants to be touched.
Absolutely. So they do want to hear from you all. And if you'd like HRT to come out to your community group, they are willing to come out and to speak with you about this and to collect your information there. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Christian joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Christian, you're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon. Love the conversation. Full disclosure, I am a member of the Community Transportation Advisory Committee representing Norfolk. To the other caller's point about community involvement, we definitely need more community involvement. I'm a huge fan of public transportation options, and would really love to see HRT have the ability to act as a regional body to improve the main lines back and forth. I'm actually in the car right now going from downtown to the oceanfront, and can't really take a bus because it would be half a work day, but man, it would be nice to jump on a light rail and do that. Anyway, so just calling in support of what you guys are doing, and I don't think that we've missed the bus on public transportation and funding and all of that. I think that we have a great opportunity to build a fantastic public transportation system in Hampton Roads.
Okay, Christian, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it, Brian.
Yes, indeed, and really appreciate Christian's involvement with the Citizen Advisory Panel through the regional organization that some of your listeners may not be aware of, but we do have the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, so which that committee is part of. So that's another element of this as well, I think, is how we coordinate and collaborate regionally, and certainly the TPO has a very important role to play in that. And I recall, I think from some of their at least the most recent information that I was looking at, if we look at the region and the future, by 2040, it's projected that the region will have more than 2 million residents. And I had also looked at some
That's a lot of cars.
Well, indeed, on statistics on car registrations, there was actually more registered cars than there are the rate of population growth. So, Christian's experience on the roadway today, I think, is a good example of finding other ways than just moving cars, but moving more people, and that's really an important element.
Yes, Mayor Rowe.
Yes, I think it's important to point out too that demographers, people who study the population trends of the future, predict over the next half century there's going to be a move back to urban centers. Number one. Number two, the population growth that's predicted for Hampton Roads is to take place from Portsmouth west. And one of the missing cities is Suffolk.
Suffolk right now is not in the group.
It has its own transportation system that serves downtown, but north in Suffolk the Harborview area along Route 17. Underway right now is a project that will bring 700 housing units. And so if you just did 2 per, that's 14. If you do 3, that's 2,100. We need to be able to move people within our region.
Yeah. And that, that's a complaint also that we get from major corporations and so forth in terms of, well, what's the regional transportation, Joe? What's the ability for workers to get to me?
And that's something that we're going to be discussing in the further detail through this study. People often ask that question, right, Barbara? And we really see the impact when it comes to inclement weather. Centerra was banging on our door when we had the snow. So I think this study is going to take a deeper dive to see the impacts of ridership on these different corporations. Newport News Shipyard, a lot of them are already great partners. But what is the real impact of these businesses or these workers getting to their businesses?
Being able to get to their work. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the future of regional transportation in Hampton Roads with Dr. Brian Smith, Chief of Staff of Hampton Roads Transit, Portsmouth Mayor John Rowe, who is also a commissioner with the TDCHR and regional co-chair to the Transformational Transit Project Study, and Joe Dillard, HRT liaison for Governor Affairs. Let's go to Frank in Norfolk. Hi, Frank. You're on the air. Hello, Frank. You're on the air. Well, I guess Frank's not with us, so we'll move on then. Jeff is calling us from Norfolk. Hi, Jeff. You're on the air.
Hey, how's it going? I, had to call in because I heard all your aspirations of wanting to have a better regional system, and of course that starts in the city. And my question is this: I've lived in, let's say, Chicago, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and San Francisco, and in all those places they have mass transit. And at every mass transit stop, they have a map of where their buses or trains go. And for whatever reason, Norfolk or this region doesn't do that. If you were to do that, I imagine your ridership would increase on itself or alone. And then on top of that, I live near Tidewater Drive, and I see the buses. I'd love to take the bus right downtown, save me some gas or frustration, but the buses are by so infrequently, it doesn't even make sense to do so.
Okay.
And to be quite honest, I look at the HRT as sort of a ongoing criminal enterprise.
Okay, Jeff, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. You can hear a little bit of just frustration, Brian.
Indeed, I and appreciate the input there. I think what I heard was really barriers. These are examples, I think, of some of the barriers. Number one, information. If customers can't access the information, as Jeff indicated, the chances of them even knowing when the bus is going to be there and so forth is
and where it's going to go.
Yeah, so we need to remove some of these barriers, and then also with the issue of frequency, the frequency of service. So as we are looking at developing a new system, that is at really some of the core issues that we're looking at, the level of service, the days, the hours of service, and being able to share that, I think, better with customers. I think an important part of that too is technology. We talked a little bit earlier about technology.
I was going to ask you about technology too and how that plays into all
because
of this.
I think in this case we with printed maps at that are static and fixed at a bus stop, that's certainly one way of sharing information, but also through online and through mobile devices. Even our customers, the majority of our customers are accessing our website and so forth through mobile devices. So, we aren't there yet, but that's certainly part of it. What kind of new investments in technology do we need to also remove some of those barriers? I'm thinking now about, as Mayor Rowe indicated earlier, some of the statistics for the current performance of HRT and some of the funding issues. And among those is that, unfortunately, compared to our peer agencies and peer regions, there really is a significantly less amount of investment that's happening in the regional system. And so, I know that sometimes it's hard or maybe to talk about the funding a lot, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the resources available to make some of these investments, you can't deliver the service.
Well, Mayor, let me ask you, because since you're the mayor of Portsmouth, when it's budget time, where does public transportation fit in terms of, is it towards the top? Is it at the bottom?
It should
How
be.
is that looked at?
It should be at the top, but it's not often. I tell the story. It's 3:00 on a Friday afternoon. The city manager's got to give his or her budget to council on Monday. Under strict orders not to raise taxes, you're out of whack by let's say $250,000. And you look at transit, and you make the decision, I'm going to cut transit, and you let the planning department figure out the consequence of that. And often that's how our routes change, and you might end up cutting out a service between one jurisdiction and another that has a very negative impact. We need to find a way to move our funding mechanism so it's not so much reliance on the individual city budgets, but we have a regional source where the board of HRT can make a regional decision about where the service should go.
So if I'm not a public transportation rider, why do I care? I mean, why do I care that whether the bus service changes or not?
Well, if you're an employer, you should care because this may be a good way for your employees to get to work. So we need that buy-in. If you're a provider of services, it's a good way for your customer to get to your place of business.
So it really is a part of the economic engine.
Exactly.
Of the area.
Consumer
It
spending.
really is.
et
So much
cetera.
spending going on. Let's talk to Amy in Norfolk. Hi, Amy. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. You're on the air.
Yes. I wanted to address the idea of transportation from a health perspective.
Okay.
We actually have a group regionally through Healthy Hampton Roads and the Consortium for Infant and Child Health that have been working on a series of what we call regional agendas for health. And we have one on transportation, which specifically addresses what we've been talking about on this show earlier, which is the idea that we, from an equity standpoint, to address inequities and being able to access things like healthcare services, schools, work, housing, good equitable housing, we have to have good transportation infrastructure. We can actually impact what we call social determinants of health by improving our transportation infrastructure. So we're actually advocating for what these gentlemen are saying very specifically, but from a health and public health perspective, in that the funding mechanism actually gets in the way currently of us being able to provide an equitable transportation system that helps to support health, helps to address and reduce the social determinants of health, as well as good public transit infrastructure. If you live within 1 mile of good public transit infrastructure, your body mass index is likely to be lower. So then we have tons of other health benefits as well. And so when we look at our populations that are most impacted by not having, for instance, their own car and need to be able to rely on public transit, when we improve public transit and we improve their access to education and jobs and healthcare services and their ability to access housing stock that is safe and healthy for them to live in, we actually improve their overall health. We don't just improve the workforce or their jobs. We improve the health not only of the parents, but also of the children in those families by addressing the social determinants of health. So it's all very interconnected.
Amy, thanks so much. This is Amy with Cinch, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We definitely need to connect with
I
Amy.
thought that-
Yeah, definitely.
But and she answered another aspect of the question of if you don't ride public transportation,
Right.
why you should care. Because this is something, as she just pointed out very eloquently, that affects you, affects all of us in terms of our health care and the social determinants of health, which we talk a lot about on this show. Amy, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about public transportation in Hampton Roads. And if you have some ideas you'd like to share with our HRT representatives while they're here and they can't go anywhere, give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We have a question from Chris on Facebook that says, can someone explain to me why certain areas have wonderful covered bus stops and others have nothing at all? And she's from Newport News.
I can get into that because being the government affairs liaison, I deal with this a lot. A lot of the community asks, We have a bus stop outside. When can we get a shelter? And to be fair, across the region and not be political, we base it on ridership and boardings. So in order for you to have a bus stop or a shelter outside to even be considered, you need a bus boarding per day of about 40 riders. And a lot of our stops don't meet that threshold. Then we would have to go back to the city and try to negotiate for them to pay for that bus stop individually. And it's not us sitting here bashing the cities, Robert, and I wanted to expand on that because right now the way we're funded is a problem, but our cities make up 40% of our budget, which is higher than any other region that's comparable to us. So we're not sitting here saying, hey, Mayor Rowe, Mayor Kenny Alexander, we need more money. We understand that we're battling with police, we're battling with local general funds. There needs to be a regional answer, which we don't have, but we're not going back to the localities. But the bus shelters are basically based on boarding, so she can be outside. And I hate it personally when we ride by and see people standing outside in the rain, but it's all based on the boarding, and that's to be fair across the region. Well,
let me ask you, since you are the liaison with government affairs, so has this issue of funding gone up to the state level, and is that a possibility?
We've had this conversation from Connect Hampton Roads to Core 20, and I know you know these well, Barbara, for years. There are state delegates and state senators that are aware of this situation, so it's not something new. But I think now is our best shot because we're not trying to provide a new service of Uber Air.
Right.
We're providing the backbone. We want to not fix what's broken, but provide a better service. So before we get here and talk about expanding light rail, let's talk about fixing our buses, making sure we have more shelter bus stops and things of that magnitude. And we have spoken with our state legislators. I know Mayor Rowe's been up there plenty of times to the General Assembly, Dr. Smith and myself. We're going to continue the conversation, and we're not here to tell you how to create that funding source, but our localities are strapped to the boots when it comes to local general funds.
Yeah,
yes.
it comes
Brian.
to mind too, and a little bit maybe with the previous caller and the connections there, for example, with healthcare and some of those outcomes that are so important for our communities. And then, we talk a little bit about the economic value that public transportation provides for our cities and for our region. I think part of it probably is, we need to do a better job of telling those stories. We definitely are looking towards the future and, wanting to see where can we make some improvements. But we don't want to forget that we're providing real value today. And we, probably need to get the word out even today about some of those things, the significant number of jobs, over 20,000. I think you mentioned as we started today, over 20,000 jobs that are supported by current service. Over 500 million in economic or in employment income across the region is supported by today's transit service. So imagine how much more value we could provide to the region, if we improve the system.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Angela joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Angela. You're on the air.
Hi there. I'm actually on my way up to New York, where I will park my car in Brooklyn, and I won't pick it back up for another few days because I will completely use the public transportation there. But it's also a matter of convenience. It's hard to park in New York. It's expensive. There are lots.
Hello?
And though I live in Norfolk, it's not using the public transportation isn't necessarily convenient unless I'm downtown and I want to use the Tide, or I want to go across and use the ferry to Portsmouth. So my question is, what are some of the out-of-the-box plans to help reach in the smaller neighborhoods to make public transportation more accessible?
Okay. Thank you, Angela, and have a safe trip to New York.
Yes, indeed. Safe travels. Well, thank you for that question. In fact, and I'm thinking about the performance assessment that we recently completed as part of the project. We really started with looking at the performance of the existing system, and as we get more input into what people want, we'll continue to refine, what we think the future system could look like. But one of the observations that stood out to us, and we kind of were surprised a little bit by it, was that when we looked at our peer agencies and peer regions, we do actually have longer trips than our peer average. And so I think the question about what potentially shorter trips, more efficient connections between certain destinations,
Kind of goes back to the minibus thing we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yes,
as
now,
a possibility.
Indeed. Now there's a trade-off with that.
Sure.
If we were, if we streamline some of our routes and, we're going to make some changes. We know maybe that would require walking another block to get to the bus stop than you have to today. So there's some interrelated things here in terms of how the system is designed. That people can access and maybe have a shorter trip, but you might have to walk a little bit further to get to the bus stop. But that might contribute to the health outcomes too. So hey, there's an upside to that. So.
We got a message from Randall on Facebook who says, "I believe transportation will relieve the dilemma when light rail makes it to the naval base. That's when it will truly become a regional effort." Mayor Rowe, you want to respond to that?
Well, that would be nice, and it's something that's been studied. It's a question of dollars.
Again, we get back to the dollars. Let's talk to Montoya in Norfolk. Hi, Montoya. You're on the air.
Hi. Yes, I'm actually calling you from Norfolk. So I take the bus 45 from Portsmouth, park in the rideshare parking area, and take the bus over to Norfolk just to alleviate the tolls and parking. I guess my question is, I'm actually coming from Suffolk, Harborview area. Is there going to be like an expressway maybe in the future that I can take or others can take? I know a lot of people park their cars there, and everyone's trying to get to downtown Norfolk for work or whatever it is. So
okay. All right.
One of my questions.
That's one of the suggestions, and you can write that down, Brian.
Indeed. I'm making notes here. And I would invite, as we mentioned before, please visit online, transformtransit.com. Leave a comment. Every single input that we hear is going to be built into the development of the scenarios.
That's transformtransit.com.
And as the mayor mentioned, we've got a few different things that are initially shaping up. And one of those is this concept of a more high-frequency regional system. And there are one of the potential lines there is in that area that the
Suffolk
caller
to Norfolk
was mentioning.
To downtown
yes.
Norfolk?
So,
okay.
Please do let us know more of your input so we can factor that in.
Okay. Michael joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Michael. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious about the overall plan. I'm a business owner, and we have a lot of people that come to work every day, and they spend about an average of an hour and a half to 2 hours on public transportation, and that's if everything goes right. If the bus is on time, everything else. So, a lot of talk has been thrown out there about economic development, and I'm just curious about. I feel like this is the biggest piece of that economic development talk that we're not talking about.
Okay. Thank you for the call, Michael. Mayor Rowe?
He's so right. We need to ratchet up the conversation, and we need to create a regional coalition of both the public and the private sector that can make this part of the larger conversation on economic development. And by the way, I'd be remiss. I need to thank my co-chair, which is Mayor Donnie Tuck of Hampton. And so this truly is a regional effort to transform transit.
Absolutely. Donnie Tuck, I'm surprised he hasn't called in. Usually he's listening. So as we look forward, you're getting in all this input from people. You're going to be holding these public conversations and all of that. How does the actual plan come together? What's the plan, Brian? Since you're the project manager.
Sure. Well, we've got we started with the survey. Okay. We got some good input there, and we're going to be having some small group meetings in the spring and the public meetings we've talked about later in May. So please stay tuned for that. So we're really looking to spend the first part of this year continuing to get input and to then revise some of those initial scenarios. The first ones we've talked about today, and again, better matching supply and demand. Another one is that high capacity type of a network. A third scenario is one basically referring to maximum coverage. So that might involve covering more of the geography than we're even covering today. But
that's expanding that 200 miles that you were talking about.
That's correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
But so we'll move into probably the summer time frame of this year. That's give the experts their time to refine the initial scenarios based on all that input. And so by the time we move into the summer, we look forward to being able to share a draft blueprint, if you will, with the community of what we think the future service could or should look like, and then we'll continue to get more input from there. The end of this, and we hadn't talked about this yet as much, but at the end of the day, the governing board of HRT will need to adopt the final plan, and so we're on target to do that by December of this year. And, part of all of this is actually fulfilling a new requirement. The General Assembly, in a couple of sessions ago, put a new mandate, if you will, that agencies like HRT would develop plans like this. So we're excited to be the first. There's two agencies in Virginia that were actually the first to embark on an effort like this. We're really excited to be one of those two. And for the board ultimately to adopt a new plan later this year.
Well, we can tell from the calls, and I mean, the phones are still lit up, even though we're just about out of time, unfortunately. But that this is an issue that touches people in many different ways and that they're very, very interested in. Mayor Rowe, I'm curious as to whether or not the 6 mayors have sat down, just kind of, had a hot dog and said, let's figure this thing out. What are we going to do in terms of how we're going to make regionalism work in terms of public transportation?
And we need to do that. We have not. But our last committee meeting on transforming public transit, we actually had 4 mayors there. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a big statement that 4 of us thought that this was so important that we were going to spend time only focused on this one matter.
Mm-hmm. Need to get the city managers in there too?
Well, the city managers, yes. Of course, Dr. Patton and I talk about transit very, very frequently. It's the last thing we talked about last evening.
Okay. So just to remind everyone again, am I saying it right? No, what's the website?
The website is
Transform Transit.
Transformtransit.com. Thank you. Transformtransit.com. And by the way, there's going to be a job fair on Friday, March the 29th at 3400 Victoria Boulevard from 10 until 2 for seasonal part-time workers and opportunity to be part of something in the water. And they're looking for full-time operators, bus operators, and mechanics, etc. They can go to HRT's website to find out information about that. Is that correct?
Indeed. Thank you, Barbara. And that is gohrt.com.
Gohrt.com. If you want to make comments about the new transformation, transformtransit.com. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Claude McKnight of the group Take 6, and you're listening to Another View.
There's a new sun rising. I can see a new horizon. You will keep me realizing you're the biggest part of me.
And welcome back. Author Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye, takes a candid look at racism in the United States. Adapted for the stage, the play's main character is Pacola, a young African-American girl who has been called ugly her entire life because of her dark skin. Pacola believes that if she only had blue eyes, she'd be looked at differently, so she prays for them. This look at race in America in the 1940s is currently on stage at Norfolk Wells Theater, a collaboration between Norfolk State University and the Virginia Stage Company. Our Lisa Godley takes us behind the scenes.
Precious Lord, take my hand.
The Bluest Eye takes you on a journey of race in America following the Great Depression. The story follows a young girl who has struggles with her own self-image. Pacola believes Shirley Temple is beautiful because she is white with blue eyes, and that she herself is ugly because she has dark eyes and dark skin. Unfortunately, those closest to her reaffirm her thoughts. Tabitha Gale plays Pecola in the Virginia Stage Company's production.
This little girl goes through this entire play and picks herself up after each little chip away at her sense of self and sense of worth. And by the end, you just see that all that work that she's done was for naught, because like the entire society and everything that's been an influence on her was against her from the start.
I asked Gale how she prepared for the role.
Honestly, as a Black woman, I've lived through a lot of what Pecola's gone through in terms of looking to white European society to affirm me as a being and to affirm my beauty and my worth. Because you can see a Caucasian person being treated differently from you, or anyone being treated differently from you, and you look to see, okay, what are they doing differently? What about them is worth more than me?
In addition to Pecola's struggles with her own self-image, she is a victim of physical and verbal abuse by her mother and sexual assault by her father. It's only while in foster care that Pecola meets two young girls who genuinely care about her, but their time together was short.
Truth was, I missed Pecola. Now that she was back at her house and school was now over, Frida and I were bouncing off each other and the walls.
We decided to make the long walk to Lake Shore Park. Lake Shore Park was a glorious city park laid out with rosebuds and picnic tables.
Black people were not allowed in the parks, so this filled our dream.
Next to the entrance of the park was a large white house with wheelbarrows full of flowers where Mrs. Gridlock worked, and Pecola sat on the stoop on the side of the house.
What?
Hi! What you all doing here?
Looking for you.
Who told y'all I was here?
Where else you gonna be? You got time to come over to our house?
Oh, Mrs. Gridlock don't like me leaving far from here when I'm supposed to be helping.
The play's producing artistic director, Tom Quaintance, admits that The Bluest Eye has some very dark moments.
And I think between both the adaptation and then these amazing artists who are working on it, that the warmth, joy, humor, love, we'll take you to those dark places, but we won't leave you there because you don't have the opportunity to step away for yourself.
Director Kenesha Foster agrees.
There's a lot of joy in the play because the play is really about the possibility of this little girl and how these little girls lift each other up and hold each other in a world that comes for them.
The children's bond is reflected in one of Foster's favorite scenes.
This moment, it's just a picture, but the three girls are playing together and they're sitting on the stairs and they all have their heads piled on top of each other. And every time it happens, I start to tear up because I'm like, you can't look away from this level of beauty.
Yeah.
Her hope is that the audience will take from The Bluest Eye the message the author intended.
She wants to know how we make sure this never happens again. And so her work asks, how did we get here? We have so many moments where we could have done better by this child, should have done better by this child. And there are moments at the end of the play where she says, I don't think anywhere in the country the soil was not good enough for marigolds to grow that year. And what she's saying is, we as a country were not caring for Black little girls. We weren't doing it. And we still have so far to go to do that. I want them to care for each other. I want the audience to look at every little girl that walks down the street and be like, I'm making the world better for you, and I see you.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And I had the pleasure of serving as the moderator for a talkback after the matinee last Sunday of The Bluest Eye. It is an incredible play. So if you get an opportunity to go see it, please do so. And before we leave you this afternoon, let me tell you about one more special event happening in our area. Communities in Schools is Hampton Roads. It's gearing up for its annual Golfing for Kids tournament. It's Thursday, April the 11th at Cedar Point Country Club. Get a team together or come out on your own. It's all to ensure our students can thrive in school. For more information and to register, it's cisofhamptonroads.org. And don't forget to sign up for our eView newsletter at anotherviewradio.org. Next week on Another View, it's Another View on Health, and we're talking about preventing Black suicide. It's a heavy but critical conversation. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Jimmy Cooper answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you so very, very much for listening to Another View.